Hello, and thank you for joining us today. We'll be getting started in just a few moments. If you are with us already, if you can confirm that you can hear us by typing in what state you're coming to us from in the Q&A box. We'll be getting started momentarily. All right, it looks like we do have attendees trickling in. If you're just joining us, thank you again for taking the time to be with us today. And we will be getting started in just a few minutes here. We'll be allowing time for more attendees to join us. When you are successfully in the room, if you can confirm that you can hear us by typing in what state you're coming to us from in the Q&A box. Later in the webinar, we will be having, we will allow time for a live Q&A section. So this is the same place that you'll type any questions you've got throughout the presentation. Go ahead and type in the state that you're coming to us from, and we'll be getting started in just a few moments. All right, well, it looks like we've got folks from all across the country, Texas, California, New York, Kentucky, Florida, all over. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. We'll give it just another minute or two to allow some more attendees to join us. If you are just joining us, please do go ahead and type what state you're coming into us into the Q&A box so we know that you can hear us, and we will be getting started momentarily. All right, well, we have reached that hour mark. If anyone has just joined us, you can go ahead and confirm that you can hear us by typing in what state you're coming to us in the Q&A box. And later in the presentation, you will be able to use that Q&A box to type in any questions that you might have. We will be addressing questions live toward the end of the presentation. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. So we will go ahead and get started. A big welcome to everyone. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. For those of you who have not used that Q&A box yet, that will be important. We will be running a live Q&A at the end of the webinar. So one more time, if you have any questions during the presentation, please do go ahead and type them into that Q&A in your Zoom control panel. And if you miss anything, please don't worry. We will be sending out a link to the recording when it's available. My name is Jennifer Sterling, and I'm an instructional designer at the CE Shop, the leading provider of online real estate education. Today, we're addressing the 3 approaches to valuing property. Our presenter today is Dr. Sam Martin from North Carolina. Sam comes to us with a tremendous amount of experience in real estate education and was recognized by the Association of Illinois Real Estate Educators in 2014. Sam is the owner of samthetutor.com. And without further ado, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Sam to get us started.
Hello, everybody. It's so great to be here. Nice to virtually meet everybody. Please, everybody, you can always call me Dr. Sam. And today we're going to start off with a brief poll and then the 3 approaches to value in real estate. We'll have a Q&A, and then we'll have some additional resources. And at any time, please feel free to write questions in the Q&A, and I'll stockpile them, and we'll wait until the end to go over most of them, I'm assuming. And how far along are you in your course? It's time for a poll. Everybody answer the poll. It's a free poll. Why would you not want to answer in the poll? It's like watching a racehorse, watching all the results here. Let's see. Very nice. I think we have about enough to have some valid results. And let's see, 29% of you are almost done. Wahoo, look at all of you. Very proud of the bunch of you. Proud of all of you because you're in the course. You're doing something. You're trying to make a difference here. So, and a bunch of you have just started, and it's a smattering. Some of you are starting, some of you are finishing. So very good. Very, very nice. And let's move on to the next one here. There we go. In your state exam, whatever state you're in, nationally, appraisals and CMAs tend to be rather heavily, it's a heavy subject. It's 7%, so it's not as much as agency or brokerage practice or contracts. Those are the 900-pound gorillas of any real estate exam. But 7%, you can't scoff at it. You can't give back 7% of your points. So I think it's a really good idea to learn about appraisal and comparative market analyses, because this is the kind of stuff you can also use in real life. Wouldn't you like to be able to meet with an appraiser or talk with one or read an appraisal and have an idea of, at least informally, what they're doing, what they're trying to do? So I think in the long run, it's a very good skill set to have to understand appraisals. And today we're going to be covering, to a little extent, the purpose and usage of appraisals and valuation, the steps in the appraisal process, situations that require an appraisal by a certified appraiser, and the economic principles of appraisal. And we'll talk about the 3 approaches to value, which is what the whole webinar is supposed to be about anyway. And whether it's for appraisal or for CMAs, how do you select comps and how do you adjust for comps? So very, very interesting, very useful information. So the purpose and the use of appraisals in valuation. Everybody pretty much knows that you might need an appraisal if you're buying a house and financing it, or refinancing a house, or any piece of real estate actually. But did you know that if someone dies, there's an estate, there might be an estate sale of their home, and they might need an appraisal to establish the value for that estate. The government wants to take your house. Through their power of eminent domain, they're going to condemn the house. They have to have an appraisal done to tell them how much to offer for that house. You might disagree with the offer. You would need an appraisal to counter their proposal. So you have dueling appraisers in court, possibly. And to that effect, you can also have appraisers who are expert witnesses. So appraisers work their way into many, many different facets of our life. And another question, how long is the appraisal report good for? One of my favorite questions. Everybody should try to answer this. This also is often missed on state exams. We're getting up to a critical mass any second now. Oh, the tension. I can feel it in the air. Everybody wondering, what's the answer to this? I'm wondering too. I think that's about it. We seem to have stabilized. And a bunch of people thought it was a year from the date it was done, 6 months 30 days from the date it was done, 10% got it right the day it was done. Don't confuse what the appraiser is looking at as opposed to what a lender might be looking at. And so clearly, the answer is going to be the day it was done. I'm appraising your house. Let's say the effective date is October 1st. What's the value October 2nd? I have no idea. Did your house burn down early on October 2nd? I don't know. I only know what the value was on the date of value, the effective date, the date it was done. And you remember briefly, I said that we might have to have an appraisal for an estate. If someone dies and you need an appraisal of their house, what's the effective date? Not when I went out to see the house. The effective date is when the party died, the date of death. Well, I wasn't there when the person died. It's kind of tragic if the family's yelling, "Forget the ambulance, call the appraiser. We need an emergency appraisal right now." No one's going to do that. I hope no one's going to do that. But let's say the person died June 10th. That's the date of value. Now, if a lender wants to use that appraisal months from now, because some of you answered a year from now, 6 months from now, that's not me. I'm not telling anybody the value lasts that long. My take on it is I was there on a date, that's the date. For financing, it's almost always the date of inspection. That's the effective date. But a lender might use that appraisal for the next 6 months. That's an internal policy of that lending institution. It's not an appraisal position. And our next big topic, you need an appraisal process to bring order out of chaos. You really do. You've got to have a process. Otherwise, appraisers could do anything they wanted in any order that they wanted. And appraiser A could be doing who knows what, totally different from appraiser B. It would be crazy. So we need steps in an appraisal process. So we should know step by step, roughly what an appraiser is doing in order to get from step 1 down to step 8, beginning to end. And for most appraisal assignments, no matter how disparate they seem to be, they're pretty much going to be using the same basic steps. So we identify the problem. And don't think of it as a problem per se. Think of it as a puzzle. Problem doesn't really mean a bad thing in this connotation. It's what am I doing and who am I doing it for? And if you took an appraisal class, you would learn that this first step actually has 6 steps in it, 6 sub-steps, like identify the client, identify other parties who might be relying on the appraisal, identify the use of the appraisal, the intended use. And ultimately, it's the intended use that takes us to this. What is the scope of work of my assignment? What am I supposed to do? What steps should I take? What methods of value should I use? Which ones should I exclude? Those are all related to my scope of work. Scope of work decisions lead me to what data should I be collecting? Can you imagine I might have to access the multiple listing service to look for comparable sales? How would I know that? How do I know that I need to do that? The steps leading up to my scope tell me I might be looking at comparable sales or gathering cost information or looking at income information. So I collect data, and here is where we describe the property. Do I need to see the exterior only? Do I need to go inside? Can I use a drone to take aerial photographs of the thing? What exactly do I do? How do I describe it? Legal description, the northwest quarter of the southeast quarter. Data analysis, that's where I might be looking at highest and best use, the maximally productive use of the land. And just so you know, what we've been glossing over here, if you are going to be a certified appraiser, this step alone is a 15-hour course. So you're getting the appraisal light version of all of those things. Estimate the site value of the property. There's 6 different ways of estimating site value. And then after site value, we look at the 3 approaches to value. And again, my scope of work way up here is dictating which of these 3 I might be using. Maybe all 3. Can you see how if I had really good comparable sales, that I should probably use a sales comparison approach? It would be relevant, right? How about if it's new, a brand new property, no depreciation? Maybe a strong approach would be the cost approach. And then how about if it's an income producing property or has the potential to be an income producing property? Maybe an income approach might be appropriate. Is it possible all 3 should be used? Or just 2? Or maybe just 1? It's all a scope of work decision. And once I have numbers from each of the approaches I will be using, I bring them all together into one nice reconciliation. Back in the day, we called that a correlation. That's an obsolete, old-fashioned word. We don't use it anymore. Reconciliation, another phrase that means the same thing as reconciliation, is a weighted average. You weigh which of the 3 numbers should get the most weight, and that's the direction you head for your valuation. Number 7 here is the last step of valuation. By the time you're done with number 7, you know the value. The only thing left after that is to report your value. Does it have to be in writing? No, it could be an oral report. Does it have to be a number? No, it could be a range of numbers. It could be some other characteristic that a client wants to see other than a simple number. Oh, by the way, did you know that I can appraise market value? I can also appraise market rent. How much should a property rent for in a given market? That's also an appraisal. So that's pretty much the basis of where we are at the beginning of this course. And can we identify the 3 approaches to value? I've already told you their names. And can you determine when each one should be used? Well, there they are. Sales comparison approach. It uses substitution, the appraisal principle of substitution, as its foundation. You take comparable sales, sales that are similar to your subject, the subject that you're appraising, and you compare those sales to the subject on paper, entirely on paper. And to bring them in line with your subject, you make adjustments to them, adjustments to their sales prices on paper. And I'm going to show you all about that in about 5 minutes. A 5-minute demonstration of what could be a 30-hour course, literally a 30-hour course. And we talked about the cost approach briefly, cost minus depreciation plus the value of land equals the overall value. Very good if your property is unique, like a house of worship maybe, or depreciation is very low. That's one less number you have to worry about calculating. And then income approach. I can take an income stream and convert it into a present value today. At the heart of all of this, you're not buying bricks and stone. You're not. You're not listing bricks and stone. And I have never appraised a house in my life, even though I'm a residential appraiser. What am I appraising? The rights of ownership of the house. The bundle of rights, the title. That's what I'm appraising. That's what you'll be listing. That's what you're buying. That's what you're selling. It's the bundle of rights of ownership of the bricks and steel. The house that is rented, the house is an excuse to charge the rent. It's the rent that an investor is buying. And the faster you can wrap your minds around that concept, the better off everyone's going to be. And that's something brokers to this day, who I've known for years, have never been able to grasp. So what is the difference between an appraisal and a CMA? An appraisal is the rendering of an opinion of value for real estate. And who can perform an appraisal? A licensed appraiser. A CMA, a comparative market analysis, sometimes called competitive market analysis, that's performed by a real estate licensee, a broker, a salesperson. And it's meant to show what a property should list for, maybe what it will sell for, and maybe a probable marketing period. So, appraisal, licensed appraiser. CMA, real estate licensee. You're supposed to stay in your own ball field. If you perform a CMA and call it an appraisal, that is an incredibly bad thing to do. Because now you're not only getting in trouble with your real estate licensing agency, you'll have the appraisal licensing agency breathing down your throat because you're practicing appraisal without a license. That's an incredibly bad thing to do. And here's the beginning of a nice, happy sales comparison approach. I'm thinking, what is this place worth? And I find comparable sales. The sales price is verified for each comparable sale and compare them to this on paper, comparing them one at a time to this. So what is it worth? Indeed, I verify all these sales, make appropriate adjustments, and very briefly, we're going to discuss how we might get those adjustments. So a question, when using the sales comparison approach to value on a property, which of the following is considered a category of adjustment? There are like 20 or 30 different adjustment factors. Which one of these would you find on an actual appraisal form, do you think? Oh, come on, everybody take a good guess. It's fun. You get to click buttons. What could be better? I don't even get to click many buttons here. You get to click buttons and participate in a poll. Do you suppose it would influence the sales price of a house if the seller had to pay the closing costs of the buyer or the points on their mortgage. Although I'm not trying to give you a hint or anything. Almost there, just a few more votes. Votes, votes, votes. All right, I think we've had enough. Very good. Very, very, very good. Mostly wrong, but very good. It was a good try. Everybody, you did a good job trying. Well, financing terms. There's one line item on the appraisal report in this spreadsheet that talks about the financing terms that a seller has to pay for a buyer. And so if a seller had to pay 1 discount point on behalf of the buyer, 1% of the loan amount, would the buyer possibly inflate the sales price a little bit to account for that point they had to pay? And so this can actually influence the sales price of a comparable sale. It really can. So in the sales comparison approach, there are probably 30 or more different line item adjustments that can be made for every comparable sale. For example, property rights, financing concessions, there we go, market conditions, another way of saying that is time, it's a time adjustment, the terms or conditions of sale, there's a car included in the transaction that would affect the terms of the sale or conditions, location, 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 and physical features and amenities. Physical features could include a greenhouse. I once appraised a house that had an astronomical observatory in the backyard. You try to figure out the value of that thing. So you see all sorts of amazing things if you're a residential appraiser or commercial appraiser. And here is a handy little math problem. I'm going to explain the logic of this, and then we're going to break out of this slide, and I'm going to show you the actual derivation, possibly, of one of these adjustments here. On a test, they give you these adjustments. But I just wanted to show you how to flesh this out. Where do these adjustments come from? Nobody seems to know outside of appraisal. Where are these adjustments coming from? They're magic. So let's pretend we have a subject property. We've described it like this: 2-car, 2,200 square feet. One of our comps sold for $300,000. Maybe I got the information from the assessor, MLS, maybe I interviewed a broker. Any of those are legitimate sources, or all three. So 300,000 sale. It only had a 1-car carport and 2,400 square feet. If the comp is inferior, you add CIA. Comp, here's the subject. Comp inferior, bring it up to our level. Comp inferior, add. You're not changing the sales price, not really. You're just adjusting it on paper. It's a mental exercise. Then the same property, the same comp, a little bit larger. If the comp is better, you subtract. Bring it down to the level of the subject. So that's why this is a positive adjustment and this is a negative adjustment. And now, bear with me for 1 minute. I already drew a little explanation. 2 other sales in this marketplace, sale A, sale B. Sale A and sale B are identical to each other in all ways except the number of cars in car storage. Sale A sold for $200,000. Sale B sold for $188,000. So what's the difference in price? $12,000. What's the difference in the number of cars being stored? One car. This is a paired set analysis. It is one place where you might be able to derive an adjustment on an appraisal grid. I'm hoping that makes sense. I hope it brings some clarity to the situation, because I know there are so many people who are really mystified by this. Where did that number come from? And I hate to see that kind of confusion. Of course, there are many, many other places where you could derive an adjustment, but that's just one possible source of that $12,000 adjustment. And I welcome questions, so I hope you've been writing them down and shooting them into the Q&A. And this is my house in North Carolina. This is a standard house in my neighborhood. This is where all people in my neighborhood, we live in houses like this. Oh yeah, this is very typical for us. If you ever don't know the style of a house, then you can call it contemporary. So this is contemporary. I wish this was a library. I really don't know where this is or what it is, but I so wish this was a library. It would be so cool. And speaking of cost approach, who here knows the cost approach? The cost approach formula is cost minus depreciation plus the value of the land equals the total value. There are two types of cost. We'll talk about those in just a minute. Three types of depreciation. Depreciation is a loss to value from any cause to the improvements. Land does not depreciate. Land value, there are 6 different ways of estimating land value as of the effective date, according to its highest and best use. So let's move on into the types of cost. Cost, RCN, replacement cost new or reproduction cost new. Replacement cost new, how much would it cost to replace the house we're appraising in today's dollars using modern materials, modern building techniques? The other type of cost, a different definition, reproduction cost new, also RCN, so a little confusing there. But reproduction cost, how much would it cost to produce a clone of the property we're appraising? A replica, stick by stick, piece of copper by piece of copper, how much would it cost to reproduce this house? All of the obsolescence, reproduced, everything reproduced. So replacement cost. I'm appraising a 50-year-old house. It has plaster walls. How much would it cost to replace that house using drywall? Modern materials, modern construction. Reproduction cost. I'm appraising a 50-year-old house with plaster walls. How much would it cost to reproduce that house with plaster walls? Can you see how there might be a significant difference between these two types of cost? Just the issue of drywall versus plaster. Plaster is inordinately more expensive than drywall. So there can be a pretty big difference dollar-wise between those two different types of cost. And there are 4 different ways of estimating cost. Unfortunately, no time to go into any detail about these here today, but the square foot method, 1,000 square foot house, $100 a square foot, that's the cost. And we can get costs like that out of cost services, online cost services, unit in place, that's system by system by system, HVAC, roofing, electrical. How much would it cost to either replace or reproduce the house? Quantity survey method, if you've ever seen a contractor's statement, this would be more detailed than that. Literally, how many 2x4s will it take? Very detailed. How much will it cost to replace or reproduce the house? Index method is almost not even a recognized method of calculating cost. If it cost $100,000 10 years ago, and costs have increased 10% since then, how much would it cost to build today? So kind of a loose as a goose, kind of almost like a quick double check. Most of the time, appraisers would use one of these other methods, use that as a quick comparison, a quick check. Are they in line with each other? And so what are the three different types of depreciation? Depreciation is a loss in value from any cause to the improvements: physical, functional, external. Notice how two of these are obsolescence. This one is a form of deterioration. So one way to look at it is depreciation is either deterioration or obsolescence. Wear and tear, damage done by a storm. Those are examples of physical. Functional, an outdated kitchen, a kitchen with fixtures from 50 years ago. The bathroom has pink flamingos, pink flamingo wallpaper. It's beautiful. But does the market appreciate it? So this is market driven to a large extent. External obsolescence, that's outside of your control. It's off-site. You are a half mile away from the nuclear power plant. There is a proposed highway coming in 1,000 feet from your house. That could cause external obsolescence. But obsolescence is not an issue. And nobody cares if you think something's obsolete or I think something's obsolete. Does the market think it's obsolete? And we have a math problem. Oh boy. An appraiser used the cost approach to estimate a property's value at $220,000. The site value is $50,000. Total depreciation estimate, $4,000. What was the estimated cost of the improvements? Very interesting. Nobody's answered. You're all afraid. Oh, come on, give it a shot. So far, so good. Very good. Most of you got it right. Very nice. And the answer is there we go, 174. And here is the solution. And the formula is cost minus depreciation plus land value equals the overall value. All we have to do is start plugging numbers into the formula. So let me show you that. You have cost minus depreciation plus value of the land equals overall value. We don't know this. Well, bit by bit, baby step by baby step. I need to get the 50,000 out of here. That means I have to subtract 50,000 on this side, leaving me with 170. But we're losing $4,000 here. To get rid of it, I have to gain 4,000 over here. The cost is $174,000. How does that strike you? I hope everybody's okay. Math is our friend. Just keep saying that. Math is our friend. Math likes you. It told me. I heard it. It said it likes you. So I think math is our friend. And here's the income approach. Potential gross income. Where's my pointer? I lost my pointer. Potential gross income minus vacancies gives us effective gross income. Effective gross income minus operating expenses, the expenses for operating the investment, maintenance, management, owner paid utilities, real estate tax, hazard insurance premiums. Subtract that and you get NOI, net income. After that, it is a nice, happy, simple T, a nice little T formula. Income divided by rate, capitalization rate, gives us the value. The capitalization rate is the rate that converts income into value. That's what a capitalization rate does. It converts income into value. So let's try this problem. A property generates $85,000 in gross income, has $54,000 in operating expenses, has an 8% cap rate. What is the property's value? Well, I have 6 people. Get on the ball. Where are you all? Start answering the question. Don't maybe come out there. I've got a gavel. Very good. Now we're getting a nice response. Good efforts. Very good efforts. I like this. All right. Very good. There we are. And let's see what the magic answer is. It's 387.5. And one more time, let's get into our little drawing program. 85,000 PGI minus operating expenses gives us NOI of 31,000. 31,000 divided by 8%, 387.5. How are we doing now? And let's talk briefly about the difference between a gross income multiplier and a gross rent multiplier. A gross rent multiplier uses monthly rent. A gross income multiplier uses annual rent. So which of the following ratios is used to determine the gross rent multiplier? Takes a little while to answer questions like this because the answers, each one is kind of wordy and you have to read each answer so carefully, so very carefully. but you can do it. I know you can do it. Go you. And ready, steady, and go. Very good. You all tried very hard. That's all I can ask for. And the ratio of a comparable sale price to its monthly gross income. Monthly, GRM is monthly. And so if you have a comparable sale, you can figure out its GRM based on a formula like this. This is where you derive GRMs from in the marketplace. And we have another question coming up right here. Which of these appraisal steps will an appraisal perform next after estimating the value of the land as if it were vacant? So what comes after estimating land value? Which step comes after that? And remember, highest and best use comes before land value, because you can't tell me what the land value is if you don't know what the land should be used for. A couple of more questions, please, please, please. I mean, a couple more answers. Answers, answers. I'm looking for answers. Let's see if you can remember the appraisal process, which seems like, gosh, it must have been about 45 minutes ago when we talked about that. All right, very good. Very, very good. Good job, everybody. And the right answer is land value, 3 approaches to value, in that order. That's part of the appraisal process. And then after the 3 approaches, reconciliation, where you bring all the numbers together, and that's the end of valuation. Then comes the reporting stage. Report assignment results to your client. And what should we expect on this wacky state exam? They've got some experimental questions. You're the guinea pig. There will be 5 or 10 of them on your exam. They are not graded. Technically, you can't really tell which are live and which are not, except we've noticed on the experimental question, your timer stops. And so I don't know if you'll have the presence of mind to even look at this, but I don't know if I would. But if you're taking the test and you're on a question and your timer is not ticking, maybe that's a question that's not going to count. I would answer it to the best of my ability anyway, because you never know. You never know what tricks they're going to try to play. So at least it gives you some idea as to whether it's a live question or not. And let's see, most states do have some kind of candidate guide. Please, please check that. It'll tell you what the total questions are, the passing score, usually a breakdown of what questions for what subjects. And it's a way for you to calculate how many minutes they're giving you per question. And that's great for time management, isn't it? If I know they're giving me 1.5 minutes per question, if I'm 10 minutes into the test and only 10 minutes has passed, that's 1 minute per question and I'm ahead. Towards the end of the test, if I'm at question 100 and I've used up 120 minutes, well, that's still ahead of the game. I should have time left over to go back and double check all of my answers then. So let's see. Do you have any questions? Questions?
All right. Thank you so much, Sam, for sharing such great information with us. As you said, we will take some time now for questions and answers. Just a reminder to students, to those joining us, please remember to type any questions you've got into the Q&A area in your control panel. And also, we have seen a couple of questions asking to see formulas again. Please do keep in mind this is being recorded, and as soon as the recording is ready, we will send that out to you. So you'll have a chance to review all of this again. All right, let's get started. We have a question about what is the look back time for properties or homes that have sold? How far do you go back in looking at these? A month or two? And what about properties that are more unique is part of that question as well. It sounds like we'd like a little bit more information on sort of how far you look back at comparable properties.
Oh, that's a great question, actually. The conventional wisdom, if it's a loan that's going to be sold to Fannie Mae, then Fannie Mae has guidelines for appraisers, and we're supposed to look at the guidelines. And Fannie's guidelines on that is she doesn't want us looking back any further than 6 months. However, I had an appraisal once in a kind of remote area, townhouse condominiums out in the middle of nowhere. The entire county didn't have any other condos at all. So I had to go back 2 years in order to find comparable sales. But what I had to do was to call my client, mortgage broker at the time, and warn them, okay, this is all I've got. If you ask for more comps, I don't have them. I've got these. And this is what I'm going to put in my report. So I wasn't asking them for guidance on what the value should be. I just wanted to know if those comps would be appropriate for any of the clients they were selling this loan to. They gave me the green light. They said, go ahead and do it. So I did it. You can't make up comps. There's no way I can produce a comp as if by magic. All I can do is use what's there. And I wish more clients understood that. Oh, we need comps that are within a month and have to be within a mile and they have to be so similar. And sometimes it's just not there. So my attitude about comparable sales is you find properties that are so competitive with the subject, a broker would not mind showing a prospective buyer the subject or any of the comparable sales. They're like trade-offs with each other. The same broker would show the same buyer all of those houses. That, in my world, makes those all comparable properties. So I hope that helped.
That was great. Thank you so much. And it looks like we do have a couple more questions about sort of preparing for the exam and where to find your candidate handbook. Each state does have their own very specific topics related to the exam in general and the approach to valuation. And if you Google your state and your candidate handbook, you'll be able to see line by line exactly what you're being tested on. So we would encourage you to take a look at that. If you do have additional questions related to valuation, you can go ahead and throw those into the the Q&A box, and we'll give just another moment. Sam, is there anything else about approaches to valuation, maybe hints to remembering some of those formulas, etc., how to approach these questions in the exam, that anything you'd like to add?
I would just like for everyone to remember CIA and CBS. Comp inferior, add. Comp better, subtract. It's all about the subject property as your default. You never adjust the subject. The subject is a rock. So if you're taking a test and they ask you a question, they give you some data. It's something about making an adjustment for a deck. And two choices say, adjust the subject up, adjust the subject down. Those are two answers you can eliminate immediately. There is no such thing as adjusting the subject. You only ever adjust the comp. So you can look at the two answers left and see which one of those matches the direction you're supposed to go. Adjust the comp up. adjust the comp down. So if the subject has no deck, but the comparable sale has a deck, the comp is superior, bring the comp down. So that way you can narrow all of your choices until you finally get to the one right answer that you're looking for. I hope that helped.
That's fantastic, Sam. That's a great tip for taking that exam. We do have a general question that is unlikely to be covered on the exam, but is interesting nonetheless. Can you appeal an appraisal, and if so, how often is that done? Could a homeowner appeal the appraisal?
That's done every once in a while. Someone appeals it. It could be a broker appealing it, could be a homeowner appealing it. And as the appraiser, I generally don't want to get involved in that. The homeowner can't appeal to me. They can appeal to the appraisal management company that hired me, or they could appeal to the client who hired the appraisal management company. And generally, the appeals that I've seen have generally run more or less like, well, I saw this, I heard about this sale that took place a mile away. It's a big greenhouse. You can't miss it. Just go down Johnson Road and turn left on Smith Street, and it's right there. You should be able to find it on the MLS or in the assessor records. And giving people the benefit of a doubt, I always look for the big greenhouse. Invariably, the big greenhouse doesn't exist. It's like a myth, an urban legend. The house that is not as nice as mine, but it's sold for much more. That's a homeowner's dream, and some owners tend to embellish, shall we say. Some owners just absolutely make things up, completely make things up. And I've even had owners lie about the square footage of their house. They even said they've got a set of blueprints. They showed me the blueprints. I measured the house and I looked at the blueprints, and the blueprints were wrong. And the architect called me and I said, I measured the house. Show me where I'm wrong. All of my dimensions were scaled off in my appraisal. Where did I make a mistake? And they never called back. They couldn't find a problem with my calculations. So I don't mind admitting when I'm wrong, if I'm wrong. I don't mind changing if I need to change. But fortunately, it hasn't happened very often where I've had to eat crow and change numbers around or anything. So I hope that helped.
Interesting stuff. Not for the exam exactly, but preparing you to, but preparing folks for questions for their broker and interacting with their clients. That's great information, Sam. Thank you. We have another asking for a differentiation between the appraisal process and an agent CMA. So the question is, can we confirm the appraisal is essentially based on the past and an agent's CMA is based on predicting the future sale? The student is asking if that's correct.
That's really not a bad assessment. I've always likened an appraisal to walking into a movie. You see one frame of that movie, and you get to watch a bit of the movie that has gone on before. Walk out of the movie and then write a review of the movie without knowing how the movie is going to end and only seeing as far back as public records will take you. So that's pretty much an appraisal. It is a look to the past. Although in the income approach, we're predicting what income will be and bringing that into a present value. So it's a bit of a mixture, looking forward and looking backward. But a CMA, you are, as of this date right now, how much should the house list for now? Very much now. And what do we think it will sell for based on data that you have now? Also, in the CMA, aren't you looking in the past too for your data? Where are you getting comparable sales? Aren't they from months ago or a year ago, maybe? So even on CMAs, you are looking to the past to some extent. And can you tell the seller, well, this is based on prior data, but we have to think forward 3 or 6 months, as long as the listing is going to last. And what do we think the market will do? And how much should we price the house for in anticipation of that? So actually, when you get down to it, appraisers and brokers, in performing their own individual products, it's a mixture, isn't it? It's a mixture of looking to the past and also looking to the future to some extent. So I hope that helped.
Made sense to me anyway. We have a few more questions about strategies and which approach to use. So first, a slightly simpler question. The student is wondering if the income approach is typically used with commercial properties.
It can be if the commercial property is income generating or has the potential to be income generating. So let's say there's a 20-story office building and the owner occupies all 20 floors. Well, it's not generating income, is it? But the appraiser can predict what that income should be in that marketplace. So that proposed income could be used in the income approach for that building. Some properties, you'll simply never find income data. Is it possible that a church building can be rented? Sure, I've seen it. I've seen them rented. But if I'm appraising a particular church, it's 100 years old. Has it ever been rented? Probably not. Are there any rentals of churches in that county? Maybe not. And so that pretty much blows my income approach out of the water. So if an income approach isn't exactly usable, and I probably don't have sales of churches in that area, well, what have I got left? I would have a very detailed cost approach. 2 or 3 different ways of estimating cost and reconcile them together. 2 or 3 ways of estimating depreciation, reconcile those together. 2 or 3 ways of estimating land, reconcile that together. And then do the cost approach. Cost approach is great for unique structures, because even if there aren't sales of churches, there are always people building them. And you can always get cost data for these unique types of structures. So I hope that helped.
And we do have we have a direct follow-up question and a related question. The direct follow-up question to that is, if the church in your example is a nonprofit, does that impact your approach to value? Because obviously, the income generation changes a bit. And sort of related, somebody's asking about rural areas, a farm that includes large acreage and maybe some large structures, and if that would use the cost approach as opposed to the income approach. And it sounds like that's sort of related. Does the farm include income, and et cetera?
Actually, these are very interesting questions, because it points to something that I really want to make a distinction about. The income approach is not measuring how much money a business is making. The income approach is measuring how much money is being generated from the rental of a structure. And so getting back to the church example, whether the church is for-profit or non-for-profit, if the church never makes a penny, it has no impact at all on the income approach to appraisal. Because what I'm looking for is how much would the church rent for to a congregation in that market. And if a typical congregation would pay $5,000 a month to rent the church building, that's the number I need as part of my income approach. If the church is for profit and they're generating $1 million a year in revenue, that's great, that's wonderful, I wish them well. Nothing to do with me, but I really wish them well. Same thing, well, with the farm appraisals are incredibly complicated and over my pay grade. I have never appraised a farm. But the little tidbits I've heard about agricultural appraisals, uh, the size, obviously, of the farm, the improvements to the farm, how many outbuildings, farmhouse, things like that. But a fully functioning farm is not just real estate, is it? It's also a business. So what exactly would I be asked to appraise? Am I appraising the land, the improvements, the land and the improvements, or the business, the farm business? What's the yield of the land? What types of crops should be grown there? Is any part of the farm in a floodplain, and therefore unusable? All sorts of issues. Oh, let's not forget subsurface rights. What's the value of a farm that's sitting on top of an aquifer, an underground lake? Where does that farm get its irrigation? But the neighbor might not have access to water at all. There could be a night and day difference in the value between the farm on the aquifer and the farm without access to water at all. What about oil rights, other mineral rights? All those things could have an impact on the value of the farm. So you might be using a multitude of approaches to value. Income approach would be part of it. Cost approach, I could easily see a cost approach being used for a farm. I can appraise a barn if I have enough data. I can appraise a fireplace if I have enough data. I just have to have verifiable data, and I have to know what to do with it. So how is that?
Wonderful, Sam, and very comprehensive. Unfortunately, we are out of time. I'm sure that we could go on with questions for you all day, but we have reached the end of the hour. So thank you so much. And it looks like we did cover almost all of the questions. So we are just about out of time, but Sam, really quickly, is there anything that you'd like to add before we wrap up?
No, that's about it, except if you are interested in a career in appraisal, I can tell you, I don't know how to do that, but they can forward your concerns or questions to me. I don't mind. If you want to learn how to become an appraiser, I might start by telling you to go to your state appraisal board. They all have websites now. So you search out your state's real estate appraisal board, and they usually have an FAQ on that website where you can look up all kinds of questions that you might have about becoming an appraiser in your state. And that's about it.
Wonderful. Well, Sam, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us. We appreciate you being here. Sam, we really appreciate you sharing your knowledge and excuse me, and expertise with us and with our student community. Your time and your comprehensive answers are greatly appreciated. All of our attendees, please look for an email from us with a link to this webinar recording, and keep an eye out for invites to additional webinars in the near future. At the conclusion of this webinar, you will be invited to complete a survey. If you're able to take a minute, we'd love your feedback so we can continue to provide valuable webinars to you. Thank you again for joining us today, and we will see you next time.